There's an interesting trend that I see here in the state of Utah. I don't see it in California, having lived there most of my life, and I haven't seen it in other states, but it may occur. But I can't help but believe that the trend here is a mere reflection of what lies at the core of Mormonism, and that is the praise of man. What I see are billboards that are praising men of the community who have, I guess, lived successful lives. These billboards typically picture an elderly man in a white shirt and a tie and a suit, and their name writ large up there on the billboard. And below their picture, it will say something like, J. Henry Jones, humanitarian, businessman, community leader. Such praise for man. The same honor is given reflected in tombstones in cemeteries, LDS family plots throughout the state, but especially here in Salt Lake City. Giant monolithic monuments with popular Mormon names etched into the stone, you know, Hinckley, Smith, Kimball, these huge monuments to their contributions. Monuments honoring the dead, billboards flexing the power of flesh. Tonight we come to the end of the Gospel of John chapter 2. At verse 23 through 25, it says, Now when Jesus was in Jerusalem at the Passover, in the feast day, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles that he did. Listen to this. But Jesus did not commit himself unto them, because he knew all men, and needed not that any should testify of man, for he knew what was in man, end quote. The word commit here, in that he did not commit himself unto them, is better translated, he did not believe in them. In other words, but Jesus did not let himself believe in the men around him. He didn't put his trust or reliance on them. He did not put his well-being in their hands. He knew the human nature of our inconsistency and fickleness, and possibly how unsafe it would have been for him to trust them. Verse 25 expresses this further. Speaking of Jesus, it says, and he needed not that any should testify of man. That means he didn't need any testimonies testifying of them, for he knew what was in man. How did Jesus know what was in all men? He created us. This is how he knew who to call as his disciples. He knows the intentions of man's heart and the false and true pretensions, and he sees the hearts of the hypocrite. None can deceive him by billboard, by tombstone, or by feigned words. Where the LDS put up paintings of themselves in their conference centers, billboards of their elite, and monuments over graves that all say praise to the man, essentially, the Lord said in 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not unto his countenance, nor on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as a man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. End quote. Just what is the cost for this image making that goes around in Mormon communities and in the LDS church? What's the demand for this outward perfection? I recently received an email, and they gave me a link to a blog that said this, quote, my nephew, who was a straight A student in high school, scored almost a perfect score in his ACT test and had aspirations to be a pediatrician someday, shot himself in the head within a year of returning home early from a mission to Russia. It all started with the pressure from his dad, who was a bishop, and at the time of his death, a stake president. The kid was always pushed to be a perfect student, perfect priesthood holder, to serve an honorable mission, and where nothing but excellence would be acceptable. Shortly into his mission, he came down with an illness and deep depression. He was overprescribed with large doses of antidepressants, which eventually caused permanent damage to his brain. They continued to try to treat him on his mission, but he kept getting worse. To come home early was unthinkable. He was finally forced to go home early, but by that time he was severely depressed and felt like a complete failure. He would not go out in public and spent long hours in the dark. When he spoke to others, he would be shaking. They tried all kinds of antidepressants, counseling, and even shock therapy. Through all of this, he completely quit going to church and refused to participate in any of its activities. The day he killed himself, his psychiatrist told him, "We have done all we can do for you. You've got to start helping yourself." They went home, and within 5 minutes of being home, he went into his room and shot himself with a large hunting rifle. The reason I share this story is because of all the pressure and guilt we see put on youth today to live up to the perfect Mormon mold, to someday have their countenance put on a billboard, to have their name etched in a monument over their decaying corpses. The writer continues, but what I found ironic was how they handled the funeral. Because his dad was a stake president, they had a general authority who did not even know him come and speak about everything except their son. Others spoke of how he was now doing what he wanted to do most of his life, serving his mission, but out in the next life. I guess they forgot that he quit going to church. Nobody talked about how fun-loving he had been when he was younger and how sweet and kind he was before they robbed him of his youth. They just talked about church accomplishments and how they just know he is proselyting and fulfilling his lifetime ambition of a full and honorable mission, now free of illness. It makes me sick, the writer writes, how much they put a spin on things. Nobody acknowledged the fact that the church leads many of its youth into suicide by making these young men feel like failures when they choose a different path or lifestyle. They threaten no financial support for college and marriages if they don't do their duty. Just last week, another distant relative killed himself just shy of his 20th birthday. He had chosen not to go on a mission and had to deal with the lack of support from his family. Before the email ends, the writer asks, how many others have seen the tragedies of suicide in their families due to these religious pressures? End quote. Far too many, my friend. Far too many. And if not by suicide, then depression, anxiety, and wholesale emotional bondage. Listen. Any man-made system aimed at perfecting man and creating a utopia here on earth, whether it be communism or maniac trying to create a master race or Mormons bent on making people gods, will end in far more human tragedy than success, especially in the eternities. I pray for families like this. We pray for people who are in this bondage because it is real. And with that, let's have a word of prayer.